Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better.
Isn't it strange how many people cling to their problems? They want to keep their problems. Really? Why? What sense does that make? When I was a senior in high school, my favorite quotation was from Maugham's Of Human Bondage. It is an illusion that youth is happy, an illusion of those who have lost it. But the young know they are wretched, for they are full of the truthless ideals which have been instilled into them. One goes on to write, quote, "The strange thing is that each one who has gone through that bitter disillusionment adds to it in his turn unconsciously." End quote. That greatly puzzled me. Bitter disillusionment is a problem. When someone solves it, why would it get repeated in the next generation? Well, it does. The greatest popular song when I was young was "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" by the Rolling Stones. Do you think today's youth are satisfied? Of course not. It seemed reasonable to solve a problem and then pass its solution to the next generation rather than passing on the problem itself. That's what we do with, say, cancer or heart disease treatments. However, in this case, that may not be how it works. The bitter disillusionment may be necessary for all of us to experience for ourselves. It may be that this problem is inherent because it comes from our dual nature. On the one hand, the development of egocentricity seems necessary for the survival of our material bodies. But, on the other hand, it is only the dissatisfaction created by ego delusion that opens the possibility of our spiritual development. That's a conflict between self with a small s and self with a capital S. All problems arise because of attachment to ourselves. Without egocentric thoughts, emotions, and desires, we'd have no problems. If so, therefore, having no problems requires dissolving or unbinding that attachment. Life is now. Life is only now. To live fully is to attend fully to life in the present moment. To do this is to be aware of the present moment without distraction. There's an old story about a student asking Zen Master Ichu for guidance. "Please write for me something of great wisdom." Master Ichu picked up his brush and wrote one word, "Attention." The student said, "Is that all?" The master wrote, "Attention, attention." The student became irritable. "That doesn't seem profound or subtle to me." In response, Master Ichu wrote simply, "Attention, attention, attention." In frustration, the student demanded, "What does this word attention mean?" Master Ichu replied, "Attention means attention." All right, you may be thinking, that makes sense. What's so hard about that? A good way to answer is to put it in terms of hope. Paying full attention to now means dropping attachment to any hope that life will get better in the future. Hope is an illusion, a distraction. Are you able to detach from it? It's what W.H. Auden was talking about in his poem. We would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather die in our dread than climb the cross of the moment and let our illusions die. End quote. Does the idea of living without hope frighten you? It shouldn't. If you fear it, that's because you don't yet understand it. As Zen Master Charlotte Joko Beck writes in Everyday Zen, "A life lived with no hope is a peaceful, joyous, compassionate life." End quote. What? How can that be? It's because it's a life lived in freedom from ego delusion, a life of non-attachment to one's personal story. As Eckhart Tolle has pointed out, that's the key to understanding why many people attach to their problems. After all, their problems are essential to their autobiographies, the stories of themselves being confronted with obstacles and sometimes overcoming them and sometimes failing to overcome them. In other words, to give up our illusions is to give up our personal identities. Nothing is personal. As long as we cling to the idea that we are separate persons, we continue to have problems. Many think, wrongly, that it's better to live with problems than to become free from the conceptual prison that is one's self. Nope. Freedom beats bondage to our egocentric beliefs, emotions, and desires. Although they talk about it in different ways, all sages confirm that. That state of fully experiencing life in the present moment, that state of conceptual and emotional freedom, that state of full attentiveness, is being spiritually awake. How is this relevant to the bitter disillusionment of youth? What about giving up hope that the future will be better than now? In Nothing Special, Beck writes, quote, "Paradoxically, this painful disillusionment with the future helps us to appreciate life as it is," end quote. In other words, we're causing our own problems. We do that whenever we subordinate experiencing this moment fully to our egocentric judgments and personal priorities. The past is no longer real. The future is not yet real. Only now is real. What we do when we remember ourselves in the past or project ourselves into the future is not only to create a personal identity, but also to create problems where there were none. We're not only subordinating life now to our egocentric beliefs, emotions, and priorities, but we're also creating problems that otherwise wouldn't exist. We're unnecessarily investing life with selfness and creating experiences rather than experiencing freely. The alternative, as Tola puts it in The Power of Now, is awareness, consciousness, attentiveness, freed, quote, "from its identification with physical and mental forms," end quote, and, quote, "becomes what we may call pure or enlightened consciousness or presence," end quote. Letting go of self, though, is scary. Why? It's because awareness is an absence. As Beck puts it, quote, "Awareness is what we are. But we block it with self-centered thinking, with dreaming, with fantasizing, with whatever it is we want to do," end quote. Why? It's because it's going from a self, which is supposedly a thing, to a no thing, an absence. That seems like an important loss. Why would we ever want to lose ourselves? The answer is simple. Since we are awareness, it's to gain realization of what we really are. Realizing that is spiritual awakening, what Buddhists call the Great Way of Buddha. Sages, the wise, take all apparent obstacles, such as the bitter disillusionment of youth, and turn them into opportunities for surrendering to life in the present moment, which is the only time when life is lived. If you would become wise, emulate the wise. May you realize your true nature.